Are we all good, Adrian?
Yep, you're good.
All right, thanks so much, guys. We're so honored that we can actually I can be back, but I had brought my father with this time to give you
I don't
guys.
see Todd.
Okay, so you have to either, if you don't see him on your screen, put your system on speaker view.
Maybe, let's see.
Because I have it on gallery view, but I have a very big screen, so I see everybody.
I can just
Remember, there are 2 pages of photos.
Right,
people.
of people.
All right, how about that? Do you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. So thanks again for Ira and Adrian for setting this up. Really appreciate it. Glad we could come back. Last year we were here. If you guys weren't aware, I came down and did a clinic with the group at across the way there on smartphone. We had a lot of fun. And so thanks for inviting us back. One additional thing before I get started here, just since it popped in my head. The tips that we're going to go through here, they apply, I would say 99% of them. There may be a few alterations or things that would only work on the big lenses and that type of stuff. But 99% are usable for the smartphone as well, because I know a few of you only use smartphone, which it's near and dear to my heart that you guys are embracing that wonderful tool. So what we're going to do is go through a variety of tips. These are, we're going to talk to them in detail, but they're quick hits. They're something that can absolutely help you instantly improve if you apply these. We included some notes. If you guys need those and didn't get them, they should be in your email, and now we can send those out again. Though that's all the text and information that's in the slideshow presentation. So you don't have to worry about writing any of that down. Just add to that additional notes, anything that pops in your head that you want to hold on to. And I see that Adrian's recording it too. So hopefully you guys can revisit that if needed. So we're going to jump into it.
well, it's great to be down here. I really look forward to connecting up with people this afternoon, and hope you can enjoy some of these tips. We have found these to be extremely helpful to our students, and so we offer them to you. And interesting, this quote: "The single most important component of a camera is 12 inches behind it," and that's actually true. It's not so much the camera; it's the person shooting. So let's start out with these 4 tips that we have for every single shot, and whether you're doing self-portraits, whether you're doing wildlife, architecture, no matter what it is, we found that these 4 tips are valuable for every single shot. And we just kind of call it SLBE, SLBE, subject, light, background, and edges. And then each one has a question with it, and to ask yourself when you're shooting. And so the question with the subject is, what is your subject, and where do you place it in the picture space? What is, and you'll see that it becomes important when you're shooting, what really is your subject. And here's some things that, we'll go through each of these: the squinting, the crowding the edges, trying things off center, moving into the frame, giving it breathing room. We'll talk a little bit about that, or I will, as we go through each one. So let's start. First of all, I've got a picture here of a 5-finger sulfur. And the idea of the squinting helps you feel, rather than technically think, I got to put it in this particular position in the picture space, but rather when you squint at it, you take away the detail. And what it does is it gives you a sense of the placement, the relationship of this with the rest of the image. So we're going to try it. We'd like you to squint at this image and just get a sense of it. And then when Todd switches to the next one, squint that and see feel the difference of that. And then let's try a third one and squint at this one. And understand that, you know, one may feel better to you than the other, and the images are yours, so that's important. So let's see which one really makes sense. Let's take another highlight. Look at this one. When I squint at this one, I feel it's crowded in that picture space, that I need to zoom back. I can either use my foot zoom and move back, or I can zoom out and give a little more space. So let's try the next one. And maybe you went too far. And so what I'm thinking, and again, these are your images and you would decide, but I like the feel of this one. And hopefully that works when you're squinting. The whole idea, like I said, is the squinting is that it takes the detail away. So you're not focusing in with your eyes on the detail. Now you can do this at the viewfinder after, when you're shooting, you can do it with the LCD. You can even do it when you're making decisions for cropping or positioning of things. The squinting works, and it's extremely helpful. What I like about it is you get a feel for the image. So let's take a quick look at those. Yeah, there we go. So this image was taken at a Botanic Gardens up in Chicago. And notice the position of this elm leaf and in relation to the lines of the boards. And so the position of this, notice the space around it. These are things to give consideration to as you're shooting. How about this guy? I call this one peekaboo. And but notice that you get the sense that the bug is crawling up the stem. If it were in the middle, you'd get the feeling that it's kind of static. And if it's up at the top, it's about leaving the picture. So this is the idea here, is it's moving into the frame. So that gives you a sense of that. How about the spacing here? Focusing in on that, notice that the bee is working it. There's space to the right of it if he wants to take off. But there's a sense of movement and energy flow in the image. The lupin is, notice how that point on the bud is pointing up. So it's pointing into the space of the picture. And this is a way to, now, again, these are not rules. This is just a sense of what can make images more dynamic. So what is the subject and where do you place it is really important. Notice in this next one, this is, I think it's pronounced Camasia. I focus just on the stamens. Now it could be in the center because it's circular, but you can also move it down to a corner and let it radiate out into the picture. But again, the subject here is the stamens. And so where do I place them? I place them in kind of in the lower left. But notice I gave them space around there. I didn't cram them into the corner in the edge. Now sometimes, you know, I use the comment at the beginning of try things off center, but radial things really lend themselves to be centered. So that works. It's the daisy, and then you can do a square crop with that to make it kind of. But some things can be centered. Everything doesn't have to be off center. You probably hear if we talk about images bullseye, but sometimes that works nicely. Another thing that you do by the placement and the feel of a picture is you can tell a story. I mean, what about this guy? He's hanging on for dear life, but notice that he has space below him where he could potentially fall. So that's kind of the idea of it. And I love this one. You know, Todd took this and hey, what are you doing in my space? But, you know, you bring something to an image, and the cropping that he did with this really helps add to the story because it accentuates the shape of the log in the relationship of the subject. So that's kind of cool. So these are some ideas for subject. Again, what is your subject and where are you going to place it in the picture space?
So then the second of those tips is light, the L in Slavi. And the question that we ask ourselves with that is, what will enhance your subject the best? And so we want to look at direction. We want to look at some quality of light. and get into some of the ways that you can use the light to really, really make that subject pop. One of them is the direct light, which, you know, in the beginning days, you wanted to get the bright light, get that, you know, subject really, you know, bright, but I think it's one of the harshest, and it actually flattens the subject, and we don't get a lot of detail in there. One of the times that it may be helpful is when you're photographing birds or wildlife, especially birds when they're flying at you. It's nice to have that direct light over your shoulder, and have the wind actually coming at your back too. But typically when you're photographing most of your subjects, that direct light on there midday is really, really harsh. So we heard of the golden hour and the blue hour. Well, the side light, when the light's lower, the sun's lower, or if you're using artificial light, using the side light, what it does is it emphasizes texture. So think about using side light to really pop some of those crevices that are between maybe the leaf or for instance, this one, the baseball, since, well, we're supposed to have spring training. I thought this would be appropriate, but obviously that's on hold for all those baseball players out there or fans out there. So we'll see what happens with that. In the rear light, another great one. You can illuminate the subjects. You can bring the light through, really makes it pop, especially in leaves, and also on the outside of birds or other subjects where it can lighten the rim of it. Rear light highlights the mist, shows some rays. That's a good, especially when you get some fog here in some of the swamps, really cool imagery coming from that. So use that light to emphasize those rays. And then of course, the silhouette is another great, this was actually shot at right across the street there from you guys last year. So beautiful cormorant sitting there. But the silhouettes are great. Just turn down that black point and really make that pop. Important on the silhouettes is to take the detail out. You can play with it and show a little detail, but I think it really has some pop when you take the detail out in the blacks. And then again, rear light, just illuminating, another great angle shot of a wave that's about to take my camera out. It was a little risky, that shot. And then talking about the ability to control light and the quality of light, we got cool versus warm. I briefly talked about the blue hour versus the golden hour. So the blue hour being before the sun comes up or after it goes down, gives a little cool feel to it. And then the golden hour is the time that the sun is still up, and it kind of gives you, what I really like is the afternoon light, because it has a cool feel to it, especially throughout the day, you get all this particulate in the air and everything. So it's a little bit different than in the crisp morning when everything's settled down, and the light actually gets I think a little harsher, quicker when it comes up. Something to be aware of. Diffuse light, great light. Cloudy days are great if you're a macro shooter or you want to shoot in the forest. Important if it is a cloudy day, just unless you have detail in those clouds in the cloudy day, just try to eliminate the sky. But the diffuse light is amazing. It really enriches the color. One thing we did notice though that I've noticed over time is that unfortunately the birds don't seem to pop as much in the diffuse light than they do in the sun, which is kind of interesting, though the flowers really kind of illuminate. So when there's those bright colors, something to pay attention to. But what ends up happening a little bit with the diffuse light is it reduces the texture a little bit. So something to be aware of if that's something that you're striving for. Again, diffuse light, great. Just look at how great those colors are. Something quick, this can be used on the smartphones as well. And the more advanced smartphones, you do have the capability of the pro settings. Some of the apps, you're able to adjust the exposure compensation. So pay attention to that. What's great about exposure compensation is that you can keep your settings the same as far as your shutter speed. So when shutter speed, we're talking about dealing with motion, and then your aperture dealing with depth of field. you're able to keep those. When you have those lined up, you're able to adjust the light with the exposure compensation. So it's a great tool to have. So just think about bright to the right. So you want to think of a direction. We don't really like to give too many values to things. We like to go in directions. So if you're going to add light, you want to go to the right, plus. You want to take light away, you want to go to the left, minus. So think of that when you're doing those adjustments on the exposure. And we can work with, this is a great, this will be a great time today to work on some of the exposure compensation out there for those of you that are joining us for the practice session. Artificial. Yeah.
Just a second. On the histogram, one of the things that you can check with on your camera, make sure that your dials are running in the same direction. Like Todd was saying, right,
Yeah.
shift to the right. Sometimes cameras come where you go to the left to increase the light. But in the menu, you can make a change so that the turn is in the same direction as the histogram, and it helps you connect the idea of what's going on.
Yeah, that's a good point too, especially on when you're for the mirrorless or DSLRs, when you're in the viewfinder, you're looking in there. Ideally, you don't want to have to come out, and you want to know your equipment so that you can be in there composing and then turning your dials. So they're set in those positions on those cameras for a reason, so that you can be in there composing. So if you can learn those, where they're at and how to adjust them, and then you know they're going the same direction. It's a great point. Thanks, Dad. Artificial light, so reflectors, LEDs, those kind of things are great. You can add light. Notice the two different images. The images are fine, both of them, but they just give a different feel based on adding reflector light and not. One thing to consider when you're adding light, even if it's a flashlight or an LED or a reflector, try to use the outer edge of the light. If you notice, if you use a flashlight and you shine it on a wall, it's a round circle, and you have a hot spot, usually hotter in the middle, and then as it goes out to the edges, it kind of diminishes the light. That light on the outer edge is really nice. It's not as harsh. So think about kind of feathering it a little bit. LEDs are a little bit harder because it's more widespread, but when you're talking about flashlight or reflectors, it's helpful. Here's another one where the interior is lit up, gives you a different feel. Both the images I feel work, but it just gives you a different feel. We'll talk a lot about shooting with feel or emotion. I think that's important to when you're out there composing. And then fill flash. Some of you may use it. I don't use it that often, but it's something that can help, especially with birds. I don't use it because I don't like the startled birds, but sometimes you can get the specular highlights in their eyes, or you can help fill in a little bit in there with the flash.
So the third of Slavi background, the idea is it going to add to or is it going to take away? And that's the question that you ask yourself. I think, even with landscapes, going for simple ones, you avoid the clutter. And I think absolutely key to making backgrounds work is contrast with the subject. So let's take a look at some examples of that. And here, notice the trillium. Do you have trillium in Florida? I don't know. We have them up north. They're absolutely gorgeous. But notice the background in relation to this. And I mean, it's not a bad image, but if you make a little movement with your camera and take a look at the next one, find a shady area and have the contrast of the dark versus the light of the subject causes the subject to pop off of the background. And so then once you do that, let's take a look at some other examples of contrast. Notice the contrast with the lily with the water. It pops. The whole idea here is get that subject to pop instead of being lost against the background. So notice the light, the color versus the dark, the light versus the dark. That really can be very, very, very helpful. The here's actually the top of an orchid, and notice the background here, and then set up the shot, the exact same shot, change the background. Look, you can even see the hairs along the edge. What a difference. Go back to the other one, and then look at, it's the exact same shot, just change the back. What I ended up doing is I put I had a board that had a black felt on it, and I could put that behind it and served as a background. But notice the contrast and how that works and helps the image. How about having water splashing? Well, what makes this one work so well is look at the dark stack behind the water, and the light coming through really helps that splash. If it were against that sky, it would all blend in and it wouldn't work. So the bright versus the dark contrast helps that subject pop. But you can also, how you play with depth of field, and not a bad image, you get a sense of the background. But if you end up blurring the background, having a more of an open aperture, look at what you can do with the exact same image. I know this was actually my first business card. I put my name in the upper right corner and I'm kind of pointing at it. And so, but look at the difference in sharp versus soft and less detail. So I really think that works so nicely in terms of showing off your subject. You can also have color contrast. You can have, like, here's green of an aspen against the yellow leaves and causes them to pop. So the point here is look for backgrounds that help your subject pop, and simple seems to really work. Avoid the clutter so there isn't a competition. So the question is, what, does it add to or is it taking away from?
And then the last one's edges. And real quick, I apologize. I don't know if you guys can hear the mowing the lawn out here in the window. So I apologize if that's coming through this thing. I'm trying to mute it out. Hopefully they'll be done soon. So the last one's running the edges. And the question with that is anything too close to the edge or just cut off. So what we're going to do is look through our picture space, go around the edge and see, is there anything where you missed it, where you just clipped off that flower or that wing or the eye of Emmett here. And so think about, oh, I need to give it a little bit more room so that's not causing some tension to the viewer's eye where you just clipped it like that. Here's another one. Look, we just caught it there, right? If we were thinking of, well, I want to clip it off, then you'd move in and show that you meant to clip it off. But here it's like you just missed it. And in our eyes, our viewer eyes, we're trying to complete that flower. So it gives you pause when you're going by that. So it's important to think about. Another thing to do that I've added to the edges in recent years is talking about this is not just edges, think about running your eye through the whole picture space and seeing, is there anything taking all, because we're all focused on our subject. And sometimes we have this great street shot and we didn't realize this bright red stop sign is just staring you in the face right here. And because you saw those beautiful lights down the road, you're making the picture, and then you get home and you go, I didn't even see that white sign, or I didn't even see that pole. So go through your image space, just see if there's anything that's just distracting, some white spot, and see if you can position yourself to get rid of that. I think that's important to help you out. And there's the better image there. Just leave some room. And of course, when you're shooting moving subjects, birds, wildlife, cars, those kind of things, just leave some space so that you can crop to exactly what you want, because it's hard when you're photographing a flight of a bird to absolutely get it composed right is nearly impossible. So just a quick review here for these. So the 4 tips, Slobby, and the first one is subject. And anybody remember what the question is? Thinking about it. What is the subject and where do you place it in the picture space? I think that's important. Now, the subject could be texture. It doesn't have to be an object. It could be, it could be anything. So just make sure you're honing into the subject, and then things will work out well as you go through this. Second one is light, the L, and the question, what will enhance your subject best? Referring back to the subject. Okay, so telling those stories, how do we want to help elevate that story with the light? What are we going to do with the light to really make that pop? Background. Anybody remember what the question is on that? If you have your notes out, you can probably have a little cheat sheet going there. The question is, does it add to or take away from your subject? And remember, contrast is king. If you can get contrast with your subject, light versus dark, dark versus light, it's really, really, really going to help your images. And then, of course, edges and beyond. Question is, anything too close to the edge or just cut off? Or another thing, we were talking about portraiture earlier, those kind of things. Is there a pole coming out of the back of the head? That's something that happens all the time. A tree, a pole, something's right lined up with, even if you're taking a group shot, you guys are taking family shots, this will be great. Say, move your position so that you don't have that coming out of someone's head. It's a distractor.
So let's go into some more tips. And what we do is we suggest that you kind of keep these tips on your shoulder. Put it on.
Yeah, I heard all the groans, so that was great.
Yeah, the louder the groans, the better it was, right? Poor Todd gets to hear my humor too often. And now I notice it's coming out of his mouth too, so there's hope.
Yeah, nightmares. I'm just trying to, it's like therapy for me. Go ahead.
Okay, so we've got shoulder, we've got separation with proximity, we've got the horizon, the orientation, lines, distance, and angle, and then we'll go in with examples of those. So the first one is separation, and separation we're saying with proximity, and the reason for that is that if you have something that is there's separation between them, but if something is off too far, it doesn't feel like it's part of the group. And so the proximity becomes important with that particular tip. So these are sandhill cranes taken off, and that's a bald eagle down there in the tree. And notice the beauty of the image is in the separation of the V and that sort of thing. How about these water lilies? Look, I'm going to have you compare these and see in terms of its relationship of the three together as a group. So look, if you reposition your camera, look at what you get with the next image. So Todd, go back to the other one, and let's look at both of them. So see how the one in the right is not quite, it's still there, but look at, there's more space between that, the one on the right and the center one versus the one on the left and the center one. And then if you happen to reposition with the exact same flowers, and there's a closeness to them, not necessarily the exact same distance, but look at the proximities. This is, again, these are not rocket science. The idea here is that you can think about those, and if you have the notes with you, just, oh yeah, that's a cool idea. And sometimes they become obvious, but other times it's a helpful reminder on what to do. So then the next tip is—
Yeah, hold on, Dad, real quick on that. In the notes, sorry to interrupt, in the notes, there's a little cutout, a little square that you can cut out if you want to laminate and put it in your, it has all these tips listed out. So if you're struggling or whatever, you can pull them out and review them real quick to help you out when you're out in the field. I think it's a great thing to have with you.
Yeah, it's really, really useful. And what's funny is we'll have some of our students may come back, many, many years later and say, look what I still have. So they find it, just the little review is very, very helpful. So look at the separation here with the steps and the both of the what are they?
The lights or the railings. There's
the lights on the railings, and then in the railings. Yeah, so that. Yeah. But look at the feel of that and the depth of that. But yet the separation is what makes it. So that's cool. And we also have, did a workshop down in Albuquerque with the balloon fiesta. And again, look at the difference between the one on the right and the left. The one on the left, there's a sense that these balloons kind of feel like they're together versus those that are separate. Not that it's bad, but just a way to use this tip and to help you. And you look and you do the same thing with birds. You know, it's really a useful tool. Merging becomes a problem in where something overlaps or touches each other. The next tip, the H, is a horizon, and it's really simple. You know, try them low, try them high. You know, but think about where is the interest, and if the interest is in the foreground, like this crab, and you know, Todd sometimes when he's shooting, he gets crabby because he's frustrated. Oh, there we go again. Did I get a groan?
Yeah, this is actually a phone shot too. I put it on a tripod and just put it on interval shooting, and it was great. So came out well.
A really neat part of a story is when a seagull started taking a crab from him. He was running down the beach. This is when we were doing a workshop out in Oregon on the northern coast. It was just delightful. We were talking about it last night and how great it was to be out there. We shoot when we're out in scouting, and then when we're doing the workshop, we don't shoot, we just coach. And so that's the fun we were having. This was during scouting, so that's kind of cool. The idea of the horizon, though, is if there's more interest in the foreground, raise the horizon. If there's more interest in the sky, lower it. So look at this. You know, you've got the silhouette of the yucca, but look at the sky. And so we're not a believer of rule of thirds. It's a good place to start, but notice how that horizon is low, whereas and it's not at the 1/3 mark, because then it would be too much. Look at this. What did you say the comet was, Todd? This is
I forget what that comet was last year. Was it last year or the year before that came through?
yeah. But look, you can see the Big Dipper and the comet, but there's more interest up there, and so you lower the horizon. That doesn't mean you always go low and go high. Sometimes you go in the center, especially when there's a reflection, and the reflection is what helps the. Is the slide change? There we go. When the top and the bottom are very similar, you can put the horizon right in the middle, and that which will work very, very nicely. Sometimes you go with no horizon, and you know, you fill in. This was in the Smokies, and look at the nice line that's going on with the zigzag of the mist in the morning. And sometimes notice there's no real interest in the sky, but maybe you want to create a mood, and so you get this whole sense. So then you lower it. So there's not a rule that you do it one way or the other. It's just a thing to think about, and then you go for that. And so this works out very nicely. Look, you get a real sense of the mood because of the sky and the low horizon. This next one is my favorite, and that's orientation. And there's a question is, when's the best time to shoot a vertical? Well, Todd said this is going to be on my tombstone. It's before you're horizontal, right? But at any rate, when's the best time to shoot a vertical? Right after you shoot a horizontal. So this is a fountain at our Botanic Gardens there in Chicago. And many times both will look good. And we like to recommend that you shoot it both ways. And so when that's a vertical, obviously, you know, it's a tall fountain and you get the sense of you want to shoot it as a vertical, but it still looks okay as a horizontal. For those of you that might publish, and for example, how many times have you seen a horizontal on the cover of a magazine? Well, they're vertical. How many times on a 2-page spread? See, where most of the money is in the publishing has been in 2-page spreads and in covers of magazines and that sort of thing. And so giving the editor the option of vertical and horizontal. The other thing is in slideshows. Sometimes you have a sequence that you want to create, and having a choice of vertical and horizontal, because you don't want to go vertical, horizontal, vertical, horizontal. It's hard on the viewer. You want to have multiple of the same format, and this gives you options. So besides the feel, it also is, there's some practical application for that sort of thing. And for those of you that are from the city, sometimes you know the subway, right? Well, when's the best time to shoot a horizontal? Right after this vertical. And again, look at the same subject matter, but shooting it either way, and it gives it a sense of depth and it makes for a dynamic image. So it works very nicely. And this is one of my favorites. When is the best time to shoot a vertical? Right after a horizontal. Again, notice the difference. This is in our Botanic Gardens, and it gives you a real sense that it can be very, very, very helpful shooting it both ways. So get used to turning your camera back and forth. It's not always horizontal.
Okay, now one that's near and dear to my heart is the line, which is one of the most common design elements. There's lines everywhere. I just love trying to find them. Same with texture. I think those are a lot of fun. But think about straight lines, angled lines, curved lines, how they're going to lead your eye through the picture space or to a specific subject. Notice all the different lines here. We've got some straight lines, some curved lines. They just kind of feed in, and it keeps you following around, and the focus helps with keeping you within the picture space. Here's a great one at the Botanic Gardens. My dad shot beautiful railing following you around the lake here. I'm just always wondering what these two are thinking while they're looking at my dad shooting them or photographing them, saying, what's this guy doing? But notice how it just leads you right to those two sitting on the bench. Just a great curved line, has a nice flow to it, good feel. Here's some more vertical lines with the waves coming in. This is actually shot up in Door County, another iPhone shot. This is actually a pier. The water was rising up that it was just barely coming over the dock, the pier there. And this is actually a puddle that's sitting on the surface that I could stand on. And I put my phone all the way down and got the reflection. So it's kind of a weird image because where those pillars meet in the center there is actually the end of the dock. So it's kind of a cool as the waves would just ripple through. But notice the wonderful lines on that. Here's a great line. Having a little angle on this line gives it a little sense of energy flow. Instead of having, you could obviously try it straight up and down and vertical, give it a more stability, a little more rigid, but having it on an angle, this is a key tip too in photographing a lot of flowers, things that maybe you feel like it's blowing in the wind and it's just captured that way. So think about giving a little bit of an angle, not too much. I mean, if you've got to feel that and feel the balance of where that angle is, but using a little bit of an angle on your subject, your lines will really help out. And then creating patterns. This is actually white copy paper that's stapled together. I don't know if any of you've seen my light painting presentation, but this is done in studio. I lit this with obviously a red light and a blue light and shot it. So, but the beautiful lines causing a pattern, a lot of fun painting white flowers and white paper with lights. You can have a lot of great fun with that. And then of course, feeling the nice flow with this image. So think about where those lines and how you can use those to really make your subject speak. Some graphic design here with the Maidenhead Fern. Just notice the patterns that we have here as well. So something to keep it, we're trying to build awareness out there so that when you're out there photographing that maybe you see something that you haven't seen before. Here's another phone shot that's done. Actually, it's a parking garage in Chicago with the reflection. Those blue lines with the tan is actually a reflection of a building because that's mirrored. So I thought it was really cool that I kind of tilted it a little bit to give it a more of a, abstract feel. But it's actually a parking garage, which is kind of cool. And then a little beautiful aerial shot in Nebraska over the farms. It's actually, those are cornfields below there, but I just thought it was cool with the roads coming in, the way they curved. Just got a good feel of it. So any of you aerial photographers, I'd love to talk to you about that because it's a lot of fun doing some drone shots as well. And then the D in shoulder, this is something that's that I think will be helpful with some of the phone photographers too. But distance, moving in closer and filling the frame with this. The reason I bring that up about the cell phones is the thing, and I know we talked about this last year, but I think it's important to reiterate, is that the pixels. I know we had a long conversation about pixels and what they do when you pinch and zoom in, and which is a digital zoom, you're losing your image quality. So I think in instance for distance is to use what we call your foot zoom or your arm zoom, if you will, and you move in, physically move your body and your camera closer to the subject. I think that's something that's going to be important for the phone photographers or anybody that has a fixed focal length on their bigger cameras. But think about how you can work the subject, right? Take a nice image and then move yourself in closer and see how, if you can do a series of, and I think this will be a good exercise for today. I know there's a Lego display there. It could be a lot of fun with that, where you shoot the actual whole sculpture and then pick parts of that and move in closer and fill your frame with it. Here's a fountain in a garden. Great line going in, leading it into the lake there. But then move in closer and fill the frame. It has a different feel, different emotional attachment to it. So just think about how you can move in closer. Here's another one, great, showing it a great little orchid here, and then, which she's beautiful. And then you can move in and really give some impact, some punch when you move in closer. Amazing, this orchid, isn't it? I mean, look at how beautiful that is. It just blows my mind. Great field of lupins. I believe my dad shot this up in Freeman Patterson's yard. So it's beautiful shot of his lupins. And then we saw this one earlier, move in closer. And you could do it in a series. You don't have to go in that tight if you're not a macro shooter, but try to emphasize maybe one of the flowers and then moving in closer and even closer. And then the last one in shoulder, which is angle, which is something that got me actually deep into doing professional photography, was my angle. The reason I bring up that story is I used to photograph my children all the time. I was a stay-at-home dad. You guys may have heard this story before. And people started hiring me to photograph their children. And the reason being is because of my angle. I'd lay on the ground and shoot up at my children all the time. And people never saw that angle because they never got down and dirty with their kids like that. I mean, they probably did, but they didn't realize that if I photograph that, there's such impact that they look larger than life, and people just enjoyed that. So angle is something you can really control and really have some fun with. Here's one where I moved in close to this sea turtle down in Cabo. Just beautiful, coming in close. Another phone shot, by the way, for all those phone photographers out there. But I got down real low. I mean, look at you know what sand looks like. Look at how tight that sand is on that. Here's another one. I moved out a little bit. Change your angle again, get down low, showing the turtle getting to the sea. Great picture there. And then how about this at Merritt Island, shooting right through the sunroof. I was following the Osprey and he went right over the car and I just put the camera straight up. So think about getting down low, shooting up, or being on top, like those aerial shots. How great is it seeing patterns from a drone where you look down at something that you only see from the airplane? Those are really cool images. So moving your angle, moving your position to create different angles, I think is super important. Here's one that's firing up a tree. Just giving you a different perspective, because we're all set in walking with our head straight and our eyes forward. And when you can look around and get down low, get up high, you can really have some great impact. And then here's one of my favorite pics of the tricolored heron, just beautiful light, great texture. You know, just eye level is another great thing when you're photographing people and you're photographing wildlife. Flowers too, if you want to throw them in there. Up high, Smoky Mountains, got a little dusting of snow up there. And then again, like I mentioned, the drone overhead, just cool imagery, giving you different positions and different feels with your imagery. So a little review, shoulder, we got separation with proximity. Remember, you can move those around, try to separate those subjects. Horizon, up high if there's interest in the foreground, down low if there's interest in the sky. In the middle, if you're trying to do a nice reflection. There are places to start, so you can move it up and shoot multiple. Orientation, best time to take a vertical right after your horizontal and vice versa. Line, think about how you can do leading lines, you know, think about curved lines, graphic lines, lines at the grocery store. Just think about all different lines, right? Distance, okay, moving in closer, filling the frame, moving out, giving a sense of environment, a sense of where you're at. I typically start out here and move in tighter. Some people can start in tighter and move out, but shooting all along there so that you have it when you get home, or, you know, and then you can decide what you really enjoy. Oh, sorry. And then angle. Move your position, get down low. If you need help getting back up, call over, we'll help you up. You know, get up high, those kind of things. So see what you can come up with angle. I think that's another one to work on today when you're there. I think that's a great lesson, Simon. Okay, so let's jump in real quick here to some of the practical applications. I think these are important to add to this presentation, helpful things that can really have impact. Depth of field or focus, depth of focus as I like to call it. It's the area from front to back within the picture space that appears sharp. This may be a little bit of review. Hopefully you guys can get a little bit out of this for those of you that are well versed in depth of field. But those that you aren't, think about how much of that picture space you want in focus. So what you want in focus, and then how much of that can give impact in your images. Okay, where do you want the viewer's eye to go? Where do you want it to rest? Okay, and then again, obviously be aware of your background impact. A lot of times you can run your focus through the picture space if you're in tight and doing more macro to see if there's something in there that might distract, those kind of things. So let's jump into this a little bit. Again, what do you want to focus on? Notice how great that background is. Now that background's far away. This was shot in New Hampshire. It's actually I called this holding on for a moment. And this was a leaf that had fallen from the tree and caught onto the tree itself and just sitting there and wasn't ready to depart. So it was kind of a cool story, cool scene. But notice that background. Okay, so I've got the tree and the leaf in focus, but nothing else. Okay, selective focus. Where are we going to focus in the flower? We can focus out on the edge of the petals, right? Or we can go interior and focus on that. Or we can broaden our depth of field, right? These are more shallow depth of fields, which is a smaller number, okay? F2.8, F4, those kind of things. Or you can do the whole image where it's a F22 where you have more depth of field. Now, when you're doing macro, F22 is a little hard because you can notice in the background there's some things that might be distractors if they're in focus, like the brown on the right there or some of the lighter green here. So just be aware of that. Here's another great shallow depth field. Just the eyes are in focus. And what's great about that is that holds your focus. You look at those eyes and then your eye wanders a little bit because things are out of focus. It comes back to what's in focus because your eye wants to see what's sharp and typically what's bright. But if there's a lot of bright, your eye will go to what's dark. So think of that. It's not much that you can control about that. Beautiful shot of a coot. This was up at Sweetwater wetlands. If you've ever been up there in Gainesville, it's a really cool spot. Actually, I sent my dad there. He was just there a couple days ago. But notice how great that water. I mean, it just falls off. It's just beautiful. Anybody guess what this is? May have seen this last year, maybe. Any thoughts? So what it is that if anybody's familiar, maybe with grandkids, something that's come out, you know, I don't know how long ago, but they're called orbs. They're little plastic balls, real tiny, and you put them in water and they grow and swell. They absorb the water. So there's water inside and they're different colors. And I placed them on a cheese grater. So they're on the different spots of a cheese grater. And then I shot it with, and I painted it with some light. So I used some purple light and what have you. And this was my COVID in the studio kind of series. So I had a lot of fun when we were locked down there last year or the year before. I guess it's been 2 years. Holy cow. But notice the focus. I focused on that white one in the front. Now I have ones that I focused on all of them, but just think about, where do I want focus? Where do I want the viewer's eye to go? Again, more general, more broader, got a big focus there. Okay, so think about how much of the picture space. We have the whole thing here in focus from front to back. What do you think that is? It's a larger number, right? F22, F36. Those will give you everything. And when you're shooting that, focus in a little bit, focus in maybe a third into the picture space so that you can get that foreground and get the background in there. And then something real quick to talk about, live view focus. This is something that happens, you know, with DSLR, you have to set it up where you can zoom in. But ideally, the concept of this is to have it on the back of your LCD or in your viewfinder or on your phone. And it's easier. It's more difficult on the phone, but on the bigger cameras, you zoom into your subject and make sure that point of your subject or where it's at is absolutely in focus. So magnifying it in and then come back out and then shoot it. Because there's so many times that I thought with my autofocus that I put the box on or tapped on their phone or tapped on the screen and thought I had the face in focus. But actually it was off a little bit. And when I got home, it wasn't sharp. So zooming in on your subject and making sure that you have the right focus you want can be very helpful.
A quick comment is, if you're going to do it with a phone, you really need to use a tripod, because if you're going to try to magnify and make sure the focus is in the right place, if you're hand holding, it's just going to move and it won't hold the focus. So it needs to be stable on a tripod of some kind in order for that to be successful. But we found that it's one of the best ways to get sharpness in your images, especially in macro. It's incredible, but it also works in landscape photography too. You know, the filters can be really useful. I know we've got all kinds of filters in Photoshop, but this filter, the polarizing filter, and a neutral density filter are probably the two most valuable. Polarization is absolutely critical. You know how with your sunglasses, you know, you rotate them and you take the shine off. Well, if this doesn't sell a polarizer, nothing will. This is taken at a lily pond at our botanic gardens, and the sun was so intense with the reflection. I turned my polarizer and look what happened. That's just turning the polarizer. Look at, there is with no polarization, and then you polarize it. Well, another thing to know is that it also works in the forest, and it's an overcast day, it will work as well. And I'll explain that in a second. Here, sometimes you're shooting pictures and that's a railing that's on the water. You turn the polarizer and you take the shine, the reflection off of the water, and look at what you have. So look at the value of a polarizer. It's absolutely incredible. Here's some echinacea or coneflowers. Notice the reflection on the leaves. If you turn the polarizer, look what happens. So go back. And then, so polarization can take the shine off the leaves. Well, this is bright sun, but just go back to that for a second, Todd. And if you're in a forest the light is overhead. Polarization works the best at 90 degrees. So if light's coming down from the sky and you've got leaves in front of you that have shine on it, put the pole, even though it's not bright sun, it's still the direction of the light. There's going to be shine on those leaves, and this will work for that. You turn the polarizer, you get the rich color, and polarization is such a helpful tool. Another thing that's valuable is signage, and this is where your cell phone can really come in handy. Sometimes when you're in the Botanic Gardens, you want to know what a particular thing is. Take a picture of the sign so you can remember it and put it in the metadata. But signage is extremely helpful. Sometimes they have descriptions of things. I know that when we were over at Waxahachie, no, it wasn't Waxahachie, what was it? The swamp.
Or,
Yeah,
this
Green
Cypress,
Cay or the
Waxahachie.
Cypress Swamp. They've got stations where they have take pictures of those, and then you've got them as a resource later on. So signage can really be helpful. And we've gotten into the habit now. We've got cell phones. You go shopping and you take a picture of something so you can remember to look it up later on. So that really becomes useful. So those are some practical tips. And I think that if you're going to really get into the feel of your images and have successful compositions, you got to know your equipment first. And I would say one of the most basic things that you can do is when you're looking through the viewfinder, you should be able to change the aperture, the shutter speed, and the ISO without looking away from the viewfinder. Know where the buttons are that you have to use. And if you need to increase the light, remember, bright is bright. When you're doing things, well, if you need to increase the depth of field, you go to a higher number. If you want to decrease, you go to a lower number. And so keeping those kinds of things in mind, so when you're thinking numbers, you're not getting into the emotional or the left brain side. So it's very difficult to feel when you're thinking about the buttons and the settings. So get into the habit of just knowing what direction to do things, and then you shoot and take a good look at it.
Yeah, and for those of you with the phone, obviously it's a little bit different, right? We don't have these buttons and all this, but if you have phone where you have a pro mode, or you can adjust shutter speed and aperture, they're getting more advanced, so they're having those. You're able to use those as well. So knowing where that information is to be able to adjust it. But one thing that's great on it is when you tap on your subject or tap on where you want to meter it, where you want to take the light in and compose or expose it properly. And I know this is true for Android and for iPhones, is that you have a little slider there that you can adjust the light. So it's something that you can, when you're in those situations, say you want more of a silhouette, and slide that, takes some light away, and that's really kind of like the exposure compensation. So something to think about when it comes to smartphone. And to get you going on your way here, and you really want to improve, here's some ways that can help out. Looking at good photography. Follow people. I know you guys have some great photographers there in the study group, which is awesome. So you guys are seeing some great photography quite often. This is such a great group. It's just, again, it's an honor to be able to be here with you guys, because I just really enjoy talking with you guys and your photography. So it's great. But looking at good photography. On the flip side of that, for some of those that are more seasoned photographers, I think not looking at photography for a while is another good exercise, where you just, if you're having trouble, you can go in to look for good photography to emulate. But if you really want to start evolving your style, I think it might help to not look at photography for a while and just go shoot and try to get into your own mind and figure out a way that maybe you can come up with some new stuff. But I think it's important, we both think it's important to practice. Have to get out and shoot. You have to make time for this art. And that's the only way you're going to get better, is to make more images. And using a tripod can really, really help when it comes to that, because you can make those small adjustments with a tripod instead of when you're trying to recompose and really work a subject. You know, I shoot both ways. I shoot more with a tripod than I don't, but sometimes I don't want to lug the tripod around. But when I really want to get into something and really get composing, get my focus right, because then I can adjust and have those lower shutter speeds, and I don't have to worry about any camera shake or any movement. And that goes for phone users too. Don't be afraid to use a tripod. When you guys are going across the street there, or go to Green K or whatever, they have the little tripods. You can wrap it around the railings there and just put it right on there and use that. And then they have little ball heads on it. So you don't have to have this big tripod. You can have the little one with the flexible, crazy legs that can wrap on. So those are great tripods to use for maybe even the smaller point and shoot cameras or your smartphone. And then take classes and workshops like you guys are doing here. You guys do that quite often. So, but finding some online classes or going to workshops or finding outings. I know you guys do those yourselves, but any way to get out there and learn more information, you can look at YouTube to get some of that as well. If you're struggling with something, do a search. A Google professor is awesome. But again, practice. And can't emphasize practice shooting enough. I think that's like anything. The more you do it, the better you're going to get. And then getting feedback from experienced photographers. You guys have a good group of experienced photographers there. And I know they give you good feedback, but getting good feedback, good, honest feedback, not anything critical, but just suggestions to help you, which we're going to do a feedback session on the 25th. And then guess what? More practice. So just get out there and shoot. A couple quick things. We offer a lot of events, obviously camera clinics, which is kind of like what this is, which is a lot of fun. If you guys are interested in this, I know this is more towards, if we were doing, I thought the Florida Camera Council was going to be on this as well. So this was, I know you guys know a lot of this, but these are things that we offer student exhibitions. And then we've got our in-field practice today that I know there's a bunch of you coming. I don't know if you're interested. Adrian can talk to this in a second. If you're interested after seeing this, you want to join us, there might be room. You'll have to ask her. And then the online Zoom feedback, which is from 3 to 5 on the 25th. I forgot to put the date on there, but it is in the notes. And there's also the image upload information in the notes. We'll also send that information out to you as we get closer there. Once you start working your images, we're going to have you submit, for those that are coming on the adventure, coming to the gardens, we're going to have you submit 2 images for that. We're asking you that you number them 1 and 2 in case we get into some really great conversation and we can't get to the second one, which I would imagine we'd be able to. But label your most important one that you want feedback 1, and then the other one 2. And so then I want to thank you guys for having us. I hope we can build some awareness and give you some tips to help you really improve your imagery. And if you want to connect with us, you can take a screenshot of that. And we'll open it up to any questions. Adrian, I don't know if you wanted to add about if anyone is able to join us, or I don't know if you have any room for that.
Yeah, I mean, if anybody wants to come, you just have to let me know, because I'm buying the tickets for everybody when I get there. So just, you could call me or email me. If you want to call me, it's 561-504-3265. Everybody should have my number. You can unmute yourself and ask questions if you have some questions of Todd or Lou. That was so good. Even if you're an experienced photographer, I mean, I've been shooting for a long time. I got stuff out of that. And it's also good to hear other people explain things so that you can explain them to other people better. And that was really excellent. Thank you so much. Any
You're welcome.
questions?
Everybody good on this? I can stop sharing if everybody. And if you need that, I can put that back up. So just let me know, or we can send you any information you guys need to connect with us. So.
Okay, Doris, I saw your hand up, physical hand. You have a question?
Okay. When you're shooting macro, is it always necessary to use a tripod in order to get it sharp?
So I'll start and then I'll have my dad answer because we may have different, we always go back and forth on this. So a little bit. So the tripod thing, I think with macro, what I say yes on the macro. Now, you don't have to, but to really, really, really get a great, more artistic when you're in close, it's hard. It's impossible, damn near impossible to get back to that composition after you looked at your camera and then you want to go back. Oh, I missed it, I got to recompose. So if you have a tripod, all you have to do is just make a real slight adjustment or just change your aperture instead of having to go back and recompose after you've worked a half hour to get, because when I'm shooting macro, I usually start, let's just take a tulip brand or an orchid, whatever. I usually start with the whole flower and then I slowly start, my eye starts going places and then I get in this euphoria and just great feeling. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at that and that and that. Well, how are you going to do that if you're hand holding and trying to get back and making those small adjustments or just slightly changing your angle or adding light? You know, if you're hand holding, you can't hold the LED too and hold the camera. So that's another reason. But it's also, I mean, if you don't like sitting still and working your subject for 5 hours on a flower like my father has, then you know what? If you just want to go grab and shoot, that's okay. But if you really, honestly, really want to compose some great, spectacular images, I think, you know, and if you're not seasoned, there's very few people. One of them's Ann Belmont, if you're familiar with her, she hand holds all the time, but she's been doing it so long, shot so many things that she knows from her eyes, just looking at the flowers, she can get in and write and compose it on the first shot. So, Dad, I don't know if you want to add to that.
A few things. Number one, the further out you are, the easier it is to handhold. And I'm talking macro, not a landscape shot. But what happens is when you want that shallow depth of field, your body has a heart beating and you're breathing. And so you are moving as much as you want to hold still. And so it becomes next to impossible to compose that shot with a very shallow depth of field without a tripod. And so the other thing is that like you're trying to capture that. Well, are you going to do a burst and say, okay, now I got to look at 20 pictures and decide, did I really get it? So the tripod, not only does it help you, you can step away from it and get back to it, to the same picture, it steadies it. And that's what's so key. So I would recommend that you use a tripod with very few exceptions, macro being close, very close.
Okay, Miriam
you.
has a question. Thanks, Doris.
Great presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doris.
Okay, my question is, being in my situation, just having had back surgery, I'm probably going to be going around with a walker for quite some time. And I probably could use my mirrorless camera to take shots that are low, but I was thinking, I just got an iPhone 13. Where do I get a tripod that I can hook onto something, and what types are there that that I could look at to see which would fit my needs? If I were to use the phone, I mean, I very rarely use the phone for pictures because I have a tremor. That's why I used to stick to an 80D, and now I'm going to use an A6300 with my new 16-300 lens that they finally came up with. But the point is that for the time being, I got to use the phone for a lot of it, for low shots and for close-ups.
Hunt's Photo is a great place to get assistance.
Yeah, and Miriam, if you send me HUNT''S Hunt's Photo, like hunting.
Oh, Hunt's
If you-
Photo.
Yeah, if you, and Ira can help you with that too, and you guys may know Gary Farber and Hunts in the group. But if you shoot me an email, I can give you some suggestions on what could help, because I use a bunch of tripods that I attach to my tripod, and I think that would be something that
Yeah.
might work for you as well. So I'd be happy to definitely talk to you about that.
Right, because I also have a monopod with some kind of adapters to hold it straight, but it's not very stable. But that's mainly to use with the heavier camera. And right now, the most I can actually even hold is the A6300, you know, with the new lens, if I'm sitting down.
Yeah, do you use the walker where you can sit down? Do you use that walker? that
Yeah, I
has
can, my
the
walker has
handbrake?
a seat. I have two walkers with seats. One is a little smaller, doesn't have enough tush width, but it's okay if you need to go somewhere because it's 10 pounds. Versus the other walker is too heavy and I need somebody to put it in the trunk and take it out of the trunk. That's my problem at this point.
Yeah, well, the one that you can walk with and sit down, I think you can end up like with a saddlebag. You can have your camera, you can even take a tripod with you on that. I think your idea of using the phone, and Todd can give you some suggestions of what to buy. But I think that as things move along and you have the strength in your arms, bringing a tripod with that kind of a walker can, I think I worked with a gal who, in North American Nature Photography Association, dear friend, I would take her out and she had a walker that she could sit down on, she could put the tripod down and she could shoot, and it was just phenomenal. So that's
Okay.
that can really be helpful to you.
Right, the thing is, right now I have a home health aide working with me. And otherwise I have no other relatives nearby, that's the problem. But whoever's not here during the off season, I will call you up, maybe we can go out and shoot pictures together, some of the members of the club, and then they can help me, you know, when
That's
it's
great.
convenient for them.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
Todd seems like a good resource for you to get some stuff. I know I have a really simple tripod for my camera and it does help, for my phone, and it does help. Any other questions?
No, but I have a tripod, that's art, a UB size, I don't know,
Right.
my daughter got it for me, but it's a little folding one that is strictly made for the iPhones or cameras, and it's got a remote. So
Yep.
when you get everything set up, you just trigger the remote, so you're not shaking it.
I have that same one and I got it on Amazon and
Yeah,
it
that's
came with
great.
the remote. It was really simple and easy to use.
Yeah, it uses the Bluetooth for the.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Perfect.
And you can, and also your iPad can fit on it as well. It has two heads. Mine does. So you can use the
Okay.
iPad or the iPhone. And not expensive.
Adrian, could you send out the information on that, please?
Sure. Any other questions? Okay, this was wonderful. And I will see those of you that are joining us at Mounts. I'll see you there about 1:20 would be great. I'll get there early and buy the tickets. All right,
Perfect. Thank
Thank
you,
so
everybody.
much.
bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you again.
Guys,
Thank
later.
you. Thank you very much, Todd and
You're
Lou.
welcome. Thanks, Ann. Good seeing you,
Excellent.
Ann.
Thank you.
We'll see you there.